Ladies and gentlemen, biggest chess event of the year has officially kicked off today. FIDE Grand Swiss 2025 taking place in Samarkand, Uzbekistan. This tournament will decide 2 of the 8 candidate spots, which will ultimately decide who is going to challenge the world champion, currently Gukesh from India. Now, whether 2 candidate tickets from a single Swiss tournament is too much has been a hot debate. We've already seen some effects, like world number 2 Hikaru Nakamura, instead of playing here, is grinding off smaller FIDE rated tournaments like Louisiana State Championship. That's actually state next to me. I'm in Texas. So technically I could have played in the same tournament if I had known ahead of time. But anyways, a strategy Alireza Firoza famously tried to use last time to qualify for the candidates. So at this point, I think the question is governing body gonna allow this to happen? And is this a good thing for chess? I'm sure Hikaru encouraged a lot of people in Louisiana State. It probably was the experience of a lifetime for a lot of players. Or are they gonna try to regulate and stop it from happening? We shall see. Now for this video, we are going to look at the clash between 2 of the brightest rising stars in women's chess. On one side, we have international master Carissa Yip, who's been on an absolute tear. She won US Women's Championship and Cairns Cup, one of the strongest female tournaments, at least held in United States. Only those 2 tournaments is already 120 grand. That's quite a payday for 2 tournaments, I would say. Versus also international master Eline Roebers, who's been making waves internationally and recently broke the record for the highest blitz rating for a female player on chess.com, 29, 30, 35. 2 Phenoms, 2 different stats. And when they meet over the board, rumor has it that sparkles may fly. You may be the judge. Now, I know there are a lot of games in this tournament. If there are other games that you would like me to cover that you think is worth covering, do let me know. I would be happy to hear them in the comments. Now, Carissa starts with knight f3, ready opening pawn to d5, pawn to e3, knight f6, b3, decides to fianchetto the queenside bishop. Black brings the bishop out before playing pawn to e6, so the bishop doesn't get stuck inside the pawn chain there. And now Carissa approaches things very creatively here. Bishop a3, not allowing black to play e6 because that would result in black king losing the castle. Pawn goes to g6. Eline says, fine, I'll develop my bishop on the long diagonal. Center is being challenged. Knight c3, short castle, and black is the first one to strike in the center with knight e4, trying to use the pin on the long diagonal. And the fact that the bishop is located on a3. Now, white could have played a simple move like rook c1, but where is fun in that? Knight d4, counter-attacking the opponent's bishop while blocking this dark squared bishop. Bishop retreats back to d7. I would feel a little weird moving the bishop back to d7. I think that's an awkward spot on the d file here and getting on the way of the knight also. But white does not use this properly. It takes knight e4 instead. The correct move was taking on d5, and after trades here, bishop f3, applying the pressure on the d5 pawn, and now these 2 bishops are gonna have a lot of fun, probably like that. c4, open the center up, and look at white pieces, and look at black pieces. White is in control. So instead, knight e4 was played on the board, and after trading those pawns, we have symmetrical pawn structure on the board. Now, I'm not sure why Eline did not want to play e5 and gain the space here with 2 tempo, but she decided to play a5 to give room to the knight there. Knight f3 to increase the pressure on the d file, queen c7, and pawn to h3. A very interesting prophylactic move, anticipating black's next move, bishop f5, which is met with e4, and after bishop moves back, queen is parked on e3, from where it controls both, has an eye on both queen side and king side. Black brings the knight in the game. Now, what is the piece that is not doing anything at the moment? The least developed piece, or the piece that is doing least in the position? Well, that is the rook on f1. It's doing nothing. So Carissa goes for double up on the d file to take control of the only open file in the position, and after b6, c5 tries to weaken black's pawn structure. Black says no, I'm going to close the center. Now this bishop has done its job in the corner, so why don't we trade it for your defensive bishop? And if you do trade it, then white is going to have some ideas of queen h6 and knight g5 there. So black decided to keep the dark square bishop on the board, pawn to e5, and after knight is kicked back, rook d6. And at this point, I'm sure neither players had a doubt who is in control here. White has an overwhelming advantage. However, material is still equal, and there are no immediate ways to break in. So it's still going to require here some technique. Now, the next question after f6 here is again, which piece is not doing anything at the moment? And correct, it is after well, I thought actually the move there was knight h2, not gonna lie, but she goes apparently a4 first to challenge the queen side here, and only after knight b4 here and some fixture of the pawns, black is left with double pawns on the b file, while all white pieces are still very active here, right? Especially the rooks. Which piece is not doing anything at the moment? It's the knight on f3. So that's where this knight h2 comes in, trying to go to g4. Black says, forget about it. Plays h5, but what about your g6 pawn now? That pawn is going to be a problem. After king h7, I think we have the first critical position in the game that had effect on the rest of the game. Okay, I think Carissa, having 6 minutes left on the clock, started to panic a little and tried to make moves based on general considerations rather than concrete calculations. So within 10 seconds, she plays c6. Okay, which is a normal looking move. The pawn was under attack. White defends the pawn and blocks the bishop. Why not, right? At some point, maybe threaten like rook d7. Well, we'll see why not in a moment here. But the correct approach here would have been still, what is the least developed piece that is not doing anything at the moment? Why don't we bring it back into the game? Knight f3, it did its job, initiating h5. Now it's going to return back to h4, and it's going to be very hard for black to keep it together here. All right, after knight h4. Apparently, it's possible with queen f7, but then there is now maybe c6 threatening rook d7 then. Or apparently rook a1 with the idea of this rook invading is also another big advantage for white. But she plays c6, And suddenly, black plays rook e6. How about we trade rooks? Says black. Well, let me defend my rook. Rook b6. What is happening to the c6 pawn? How are we defending it? Well, that pawn has gone into a dust. Okay, it has evaporated from the board. Okay, black has double pawns on the b file, so it's not that big of a deal. Plus, white still has some prospects to attack the king. And black returns the favor by playing rook b6 because pawn was simply hanging. So black decides to move the rook and free e6 square for the bishop. Better would have been apparently rook e7. Okay, closer to the king. Because after rook b6, queen g8, king h6, now there is a threat of bishop e6 to trap the queen. So white plays rook e8 not to allow it. Black insists on playing bishop e6, plays rook to c6, which apparently is a mistake. And the reason why it's a mistake here is that after knight e3, bishop e6, there is a line here for white. What is the best continuation for white? What do you think? I would highly recommend stopping the video, taking time here to see what you would do here if you were playing with white and try to calculate as much as you can. All right, now queen is trapped. So what do? We either have to sacrifice something or we have to create equal or stronger amount of threat. Only stronger amount of threat here would be check, but that doesn't lead to anything because pawns simply captured it. So what about the equal amount of threat? And that's what Carissa did, knight to d5, which is a mistake because queens are going to be traded off the board. And after bishop takes b3 here, white is fighting for the dear life, which with the correct play from black, as we will see, is not going to be possible. Instead, now after bishop e6 here, what if I told you white is completely winning by force? Okay, we have to keep the queen on the board, obviously. So rook takes e6, rook takes e6, and can you see the move? This was actually a very cool tactic that I'm sure Carissa have nightmares about, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little challenging to slip for her. Okay, games like this, being so close to a full point, it could be heartbreaking. But we'll see now what happened. So after rook takes e6 here, the move is bishop takes h5. Okay, if you take with the king, you're getting mated because you can't block it with the bishop. If you block it, or if you take it with a pawn, knight f5 check, king g6, and we bring the last piece into the attack with rook to d3, coming to g3, and mate is unstoppable because h4 will simply take with the check and go back to f5. And if you go check c1, try to give perpetual, rook g3 is going to be the cross check. You'll lose the queen, and the next will more material. So game is pretty much decided there. So instead of winning in few moves here in a very fashionable manner, after being in charge for the entire game, Carissa lets it slip in time trouble. She had seconds left on the clock. There was 2 moves before making time control, because after 40 moves they get an additional 30 minutes. Props to Eline. After giving the chance, she pounced on it relentlessly. All right, that extra pawn with a bishop pair was escorted to promotion flawlessly, And here after rook to 3, knight is under attack. Then rook gets behind the pawn. White does not want to trade, but then bishop gets into the diagonal to the square of the promotion. And here comes the brilliancy, so called by chess.com here, bishop to d3, d3 sacrificing in exchange. And no doubt bishop takes e4 and back rook on a8 would also be winning, because that would be 2 pawns. But bishop takes b1 is simpler, because after playing bishop d5, bishop simply moves back, and then promotion is going to be unstoppable. If you go back with the bishop, bishop e4 again is going to win the rook. So after rook b8, she promotes to a queen, and then is left with 2 bishops versus 1, which was converted without further difficulty. Okay, brings the king closer, and the final position actually king f2 with the unstoppable mate on g4 or g2. What a roller coaster. From 19-year-old Eline Roebers, and I believe Carissa is 22 years old at the moment. I had a lot of fun, and I definitely felt for Carissa in this game, but such is chess. It can be brutal. Sometimes you are the one who gets lucky, sometimes you are the one on the receiving end. So I guess that's how it works. Do let me know what you think about the game and which games you want to see covered. I will try to do my best picking them for you. Cheers. I'll see you in the next one.